Penso ad esempio al tema del certificato verde digitale, siamo stati i primi a sostenerlo, ci auguriamo che venga adottato il prima possibile in un orizzonte di totale reciprocità con tutti gli altri Stati europei.
We are trying for a live stream today for today's podcast. Hopefully it works out. It's all kind of new technology for me. So if we're floundering, please forgive us. Today, we wanted to talk about, there's a lot of rage about the new Italian Prime Minister. And you've seen the video, right?
I've seen one video. I don't know if there's more. Is there more than one or just one video?
The one of like the very hopeful speech that Matt Walsh shared, where she really identifies the globalist plan, right? Let's see. What is her exact name? Giorgia Meloni.
Right.
All right. So we wanted to talk about this because I've actually had like a ton of people messaging me about sharing her speech. Now, I think, sometimes for example, when I share something like this, people assume that like I'm 100% in support of this person or that I see this person as a savior and that it's like, oh no, don't stop outsourcing your power to another savior. By no means was that my personal reason for sharing it. And in fact, what interested me most was what she was saying and her messaging versus how the mainstream media is covering her victory. Because they are breathlessly talking about Italy backsliding out of democracy into fascism and that this is Italy's return to fascism. It's a really extreme response. And in fact, I think I posted that on the caption of my Instagram, that watch this video, then go look at the mainstream media responses. So I thought this would be a fun topic to unpack because there's a lot of people blackpilling about this, basically, being like, nope, it's hopeless. Look, we found this old video of her and she has all these corrupt ties and she supported all these corrupt things. And so, no, you're just being tricked again. But is it really that simple? Is it really that black and white? So there's a video. I don't know if I'll actually properly play it. Let's see. Will the video play?
Penso ad esempio al tema del certificato verde digitale, siamo stati i primi a sostenerlo, ci auguriamo che venga adottato il prima possibile in un orizzonte di totale reciprocità con tutti gli altri Stati europei. È una priorità ed è fondamentale per ripristinare la libertà di circolazione e far ripartire soprattutto il turismo. Io voglio ovviamente salutare, e vado alla conclusione, i rappresentanti delle professioni sanitarie. Come sapete, Fratelli d'Italia è stata favorevole allo scudo penale per i sanitari, i medici e per tutti i vaccinatori.
Right? Okay, so is it possible, do you think, Amanda, for someone to be able to identify the sort of deep state narrative as she does in this very famous speech right now, but also support passports? What are your thoughts?
I think that it's possible. It's odd, I guess, but not really, because
we've seen a lot of people who are in the gradient of like COVIDian.
Yes, I think actually what's more ludicrous is the idea that anything is black or white, or that you know everything about someone based on one thing you know about them.
Yes.
It's sort of a reductionism of even like that human being. Like, I think, it happens with leaders though, so I also understand that does tend to happen with leaders as well, but it happens with everybody.
No, you're right. There's like a sort of triggered response, I think, that people have, and it can go either way. So it's either like, oh my God, this is it. This is the precipice. This is the breakthrough of the people. Or this is another super dark, twisted plot where we're being like deeply misled by a bad actor again. Mm-hmm. And there's no room for the in-between. And, I do think it's possible. Now, there's some other ties that she has to foundations and think tanks connected to Bill Gates and all the creep shows, and she has in the past aligned herself with some of that.
Yes, but whom in politics has not sort of sold?
That's right. Who are you waiting for?
Yeah. Like it's not. There's no like pristine pathway.
Yeah.
In it at this point in time.
Doesn't exist.
So if you do want to be someone of power, there probably is something in your background that is murky and freaky, or distasteful, or
and also, what does a change of heart look like? What if she was involved in those things not out of evil or a desire to serve herself or to just gain raw power? Maybe she believed in some of those things, and now she's seeing what's really going on and is like, holy shit, I need to do a major change in direction here. What would it look like for that to happen? So, for example, there is a doctor. There's a lot of videos going viral about this doctor right now. He was very rude about the vaccine. He was very hardlined about it, talking about the mindset of anti-vaxxers and how it's based on anti-scientific misleading data and disinformation and misinformation. He was very staunch about this and pretty cruel to people who were saying no to the mandates. Now his father is dead, and he is openly saying, I believe it was the vaccine. And he is openly saying, I believe it is causing harm and we need to immediately stop giving it to children. So this is someone who was maligned by people as like an evil doctor who's just pushing an agenda. And he has publicly changed his entire position and done a total about-face. And there's something going on there that I think is really, really important. What would it look like for a political figure to do that? Mm-hmm. You know? Might it look like this? I don't know. Of course, yes, there's all the ties to the shady organizations. But it remains to be seen, what will this leader's actions lead to, right? Because now we don't know what she's going to do as prime minister yet. We've seen the way she speaks, and it was particularly notable to me that the way she identified the globalist agenda was really like fresh and clear, talking about how we're not being allowed to have identities. And in fact, the whole goal is to stop us from having identities. And the idea is to have identities with no roots and really to just be like a number, parent 1, parent 2, gender X.
Yes.
All of those things, right?
Yes.
So she articulated it in a way that I found particularly appealing because it was almost like she had like read the Toronto Protocols or like had actually looked at the agenda that is truly being enacted. Because, of course, there's this whole veil of it being progressive and it being to save, you know, transgender youth and all the veneers they have over top of it. But I wanted to read this quote from, what is this guy's name again? The Italian Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano. This guy's been really outspoken against the deep state. You know, he's said a lot of very interesting things. He calls out the globalist plan all the time. So, of course, this is someone who's a resident of Italy. So he has pretty strong ideas about what's going on here. But he articulated it in a really, really interesting way. And I thought it was really worth remarking. Let me just find the right spot here. Okay, this is one part. In essence, the disconnect between voters and elected representatives, between citizens and the political class, has been repeated in the form of desire, so to speak, attributing to Fratelli d'Italia, that's the party, that's the name of the party of the new prime minister. So attributing to Fratelli d'Italia a role that the party itself has declared for weeks that it does not want to assume, since it does not intend to question either the policies of the European Union or the aims of NATO and the American deep state. It is as if the average Italian had decided to vote for Meloni despite her being openly in continuity with the Draghi agenda, as if to force her hand, so that, by virtue of an overwhelming majority, she gets bold and takes those steps that until the eve of the elections she promised not to take. And just as there are some who fear that Maloney will behave like a fascist, i.e. the mainstream media response, and who for this reason cry out for the democratic emergency threatening expatriation, so there are many, certainly all the voters of Fratelli d'Italia, who hope and pray she acts as an Italian, as a patriot, and as a Christian, and that they will know how to overlook the fact that in order to get to the Palazzo Chigi to see if the Prime Minister gave reassurances that in reality she could deny in fact. So, very, very interesting. The other thing that he says here that I wanted to read out is that... What does he say about her? Okay. Giorgia Meloni is, for the moment, a potential Prime Minister. She is such for those who expect Fratelli d'Italia to be the voice of that true and motivated dissent against the entire political class, and that as such acts with strength and determination without allowing itself to be intimidated. She is a potential Prime Minister for those who have decided to grant her the trust that others have repeatedly disappointed and betrayed. This is an irrational gesture, motivated by growing concern for the fate of the nation and by the idea that an overwhelming majority in Parliament can give the new government certainty of action to make strong choices. Okay, so it's interesting the way he's describing this, right? Because he's talking about how, to an extent, people see her and they see what's going on, but some people in Italy really feel like if enough people get behind her, she'll be forced by the will of the people to actually serve the people because it's an overwhelming majority, because she won so vastly. And this is an interesting point to me, because it's like, what is the will of the people? What is that force? You know, in this case, this cat is really causing a scene here. Cat, you cannot be part of the podcast. You cannot. You are denied. What is the will of the people in this case? And so the reason I bring that up is because it's like all these people messaging me being like, no, she's deep state, don't share her videos, or like, you don't understand, we're being tricked. It's like, okay, but if there's an overwhelming majority, there is a force of the people here. Are you denying that the actual force of the people wanting change in Italy and that feeling of rising up has no power at all? Are the people of Italy powerless because she has a somewhat corrupt history? Do they have no power? Does the will of the people not exist because of globalists? That's not true. I saw this too with the truckers here in Canada, right? Immense cause for hope in Canada and around the world. Tons of people being like, this is just their same playbook. They socially engineered this so that they could create the emergency powers. It's all just part of the game. It's hopeless, blah, blah, blah. This happens you get blackpilled as soon as you mention anything hopeful.
Yeah, and I do get that because, but I think then again, it's maybe some of that could be lessened with like a real understanding of like human experience and like the understanding that even like the most evil people who seem not human are having a human experience. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So even like, with Justin Trudeau, I know it was like that for a while. It was like he was just dehumanized to his like worst qualities. And clearly that's not all he is, even though he's a horrible person and he's hurt many people. But it's more for like yourself, even. It's not for them. It's not to like give them compassion necessarily. It's for you to have more of a vast and like more depth of understanding of just the human experience. So it's like, just because you see like an evil person as a human and in their humanness doesn't mean you're having compassion for them or that you think that they're going to do a good job or anything like that. But they're allowed to be human and they're allowed to have all these...
Yeah, you're not like forgiving them by seeing their humanness.
No, it has like, it's not tied to that. You can still hate them and, even like want horrible things if you have, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But...
We have a child doing something. I have no idea what's going on here.
Yes. Yeah.
What was that? Begging for TV?
I think so.
A miming of TV begging?
I think so.
This broadcast has been interrupted by a child's desires for TV. Yeah, so, no, I really appreciate what you're saying. That seeing the humanness in the evil, evil, evil people of this world, and there are evil, actual evil people.
Like, even Satanists,
Yeah.
they're in...
They're here for the human experience. That's right. They're here for the human experience. So, except, I mean, I know there's some people who believe that there's, like, reptilians, hidden, shape-shifting, and...
okay, I guess.
I guess there's that, if you want to insert that in, whatever. But truly, the majority of the time, we're dealing with evil humans who are still a human.
Yeah.
And it is easy to forget that.
Yeah.
You know, in the same way, Trudeau turned, Canadians against each other and caused people to see, anyone against the mandate as anti-science, misogynist, racist. It was the dehumanization of anyone standing against those mandates,
And again, I know that there's, like, the flip side to it, where they've been, like, really pumping the compassion for the evil people, like, on shows and, like, having the...
Like Netflix.
Yeah, and so, like, I do get that, but I'm not saying that we should suddenly start, like, thinking of these murderers as heroes, but just see them as human beings that are, deeply disturbed, like, there's something going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a joke what's going on. They're deeply disturbed.
Yes.
And obviously should be punished and, like, all these things.
I think the nuance there with, like, all the shows Netflix is doing about murderers and trying to make that appealing is that they want you to identify with them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the tricky thing. I think Dexter was big for that, right? The show was all about identifying with this serial killer, being like, you know what, I kind of want that pedophile dead too, and the cops weren't going to do it, like, I kind of support it. Like, it's this, and it's different. I think it's different than seeing the humanness. It's different than compassion. It's different than respect or forgiveness. Those are all very different things. And I think you're right. Like, there is something to some of that Netflix propaganda. There's something to seeing serial killers as just humans, because it's really important to understand. This is something that
they're human beings.
John Paul Rice talks about very eloquently in my new series Superorganism on Dauntless Dialogue. Go check it out. And there is a moment in the series where he talks about Hitler's childhood and the conditions of his childhood, right? What happened to Hitler's innocence for that adult to manifest? And the time in which Hitler was alive, he was beaten within an inch of his life by his father, I think 3 or 4 times that are just on record. Okay, so that's just the times that it was recorded. He was emotionally abused by his grandmother and told that his art was shit, and he was treated like trash. And also, the conditions of the culture at that time were that it was okay if you had a baby and couldn't handle having the baby. It was okay to throw the baby out in the snow and let it die, just freeze to death. Like, that was just okay in the culture. Mm-hmm. So it's not like there were sociopaths killing babies. It was normalized in the culture. Those were the conditions. So when you think of, like, the way innocence was seen, and then the abuse he faced, and all those conditions coalescing to create that being, then that's a good example of this. There's humanness. It's like, yeah, I guess if I was beaten almost to death, and if I was maybe I would become Hitler too. I don't know. I mean, or some extreme manifestation of an evil human on some level, whatever. The point being that we're all here in a swirl of conditions that cause us to arrive upon, this point in time in human history. And so what is this woman's swirl of conditions? We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. What did it take for her to get where she is?
Mm-hmm. And to become who she is. And we don't know who she is.
Yeah.
Also, we have no idea. We have no idea.
You're surely not going to get that information from the mainstream news.
Well, again...
So that's an alert, It's like anything that comes across the mainstream. And again, you still have to say that not everything on the mainstream news is a lie, but when it's like Mockingbird style. You're
Yes.
like, okay, this
That's
is
right.
an alert.
When they're
you
like,
know?
Italy slide into fascism, Italy slide into fascism, Italy slide into
and
fascism,
it just
over and
bursts,
over.
like, suddenly onto the scene. And
Yeah.
I'm going, what is going on? Like, it's the next, you can feel it. It's one of the next big narratives, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And so why do they need that narrative? And if this is some sort of double agent scenario where we're being given hopium only to have it ripped away, then what is the purpose of this massive media campaign?
Yeah.
Where they're bringing on experts to go through history and they're like creating mind maps connecting her to fascists and to the history of Mussolini and all this stuff. Like, they're going very far with it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I just think, like, I guess the people who are still, like, using the news to just be saturated, like, maybe those people, I guess. They're just shooting out into the wilderness with their their random shots, I guess, of, you know, trying to create a narrative to the people who aren't critically thinking and
They're a
asking
little extreme
questions
based,
about why is this, you know, why do they have this strong narrative and what are they using to back it up, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's questionable, I suppose.
Well, and we can look
Who they would be
historically.
really reaching.
At what point has the media gone into a panic like this when it was a fake panic? I don't recall them ever doing that. Normally, when they create a big guffaw, this is what they did with the truckers. They did everything in their power to make it seem like they were all racist, white supremacist, anti-science extremists.
Exactly.
And it worked, and a lot of Canadians bought that messaging, and it turned Canadians against all these truckers and the people standing with them.
Maybe something similar.
There seems to be something similar here, right?
So.
Why would they be doing a sort of double fake out? And not that that's impossible, because we do live in a time of irregular warfare. So war is asymmetrical, and the fog of war is very thick, and so we do have to create a kind of openness to that.
That's always possible.
So maybe this is the first time, but I can't recall a time when the corporatized media machine has gone into a panic like this and wasn't sincerely in a panic because their power is being threatened, because their narrative is being threatened.
Yeah,
right?
Historically, it's like even in the last couple of years, that's what they've done with COVID. That's what they've done.
Yeah.
Everything, and I guess that's why, you know, people are even cautioning around, like, completely blowing off the news, you know, because, again, it creates this sort of extremist response, like, everything on the news is a lie, you know, which I can be someone like that, but, you know,
sometimes it's not.
Every once in a while I go back to the news and really encourage myself to, like, not just blow it off, even though I want to, because they're all awful. Like, it's just awful.
Yep.
It's awfulness every time, but I go back hopeful and try again and see. But yeah, historically you're right, they've not proven themselves or shown even one time that their panic was sort of a deceit of some kind, that they weren't really panicked.
Trust the panic. Trust the panic. I mean, to an extent. So, you know, and also, if this new prime minister in Italy is like one of their shills, right? Why would they want to completely destroy her character? Don't they need her to be the puppet?
Well, the fascism thing, I mean, there could be, like, other things lined up to keep the fascism narrative, like, going. Like, you know, has anyone associated this with, like, anything to do with Donald Trump? Like, are they bringing up that in some way to tie it together? Like, or concern about a rise in fascism with now this?
Probably. I'm sure there will be, like, a piece from The Atlantic and the New York Times and Wall Street Journal. We'll all have these, like, elaborate mental gymnastics talking about the connections between them, even though, historically, fascism has arisen from the left. Let's be real. There's a very, you know, it's a pretty right-wing situation, and fascism emerged from the left. So somehow this conservative, they're flipping it around, being like, this new conservative prime minister is fascist and right-wing, and like you got to do a lot of mental gymnastics to really get there, to be honest.
Yeah, or just believe them. simply.
Yeah.
And just literally take what they're saying as of now a new truth for you without doing any of your own research or thinking or questioning it and going, is that a belief that I'm just going to take and hold, a truth that I'm going to take in and just hold that truth? You know, I guess there are people that do that. They just watch the news, they take it in, and it's just all truth. Why would they lie?
You know, she uses a quote at the end of the speech that I shared. I'm trying to remember what it... I kind of want to look it up. It's really quite fascinating because it identifies where we are in history. I'm going to find it right now. It's at the very end here. Someone named Chesterton, which, frankly, I want to look this up. Apparently, more than a century ago, someone named Chesterton wrote, "Fires will be kindled to testify that 2 and 2 make 4. Swords will be drawn to prove that leaves are green in summer." I mean, that really aptly describes where we are in history. When you think of, like, the battle to define a woman right now, and just to say that men can get pregnant and all this stuff, it's like there's like a war
on things that seem
that are obvious, that are right there. 2 + 2 = 4, like leaves are green in summer, and it's like an actual all-out war just for the foundations of reality itself, for objective reality. And so, you know, again, even her delivering those words to an uprising in Italy, even if she's some sort of agent of the deep state, the amount of emotional and spiritual power that comes from the people feeling they've made a change and hearing someone articulate where we are in history with such precision, again, like, there are collective forces in motion there that cannot be disregarded. It's like the Collective Consciousness Project, I think it's called. They've been measuring events in human collective consciousness for a long time now by measuring the Earth's ionosphere and the way it interacts with human events. And it ties into HeartMath, the HeartMath Institute, the way that the magnetic fields generated by human hearts interact with the Earth's ionosphere. So anyways, they did these studies where they saw a massive sort of spike in the human collective's experience for a couple different events. One of them was the election of Barack Obama. Now, I remember back in the day when that happened, there was a ton of hope and hype and like a feeling of like good change they had created around that event. Now, I'll admit that at that time, I did not know that about Obama's corruption or his secrecy or him being truly named Barry Soetoro and like all this weird stuff.
His wife's...
Yeah,
maybe.
His wife might be a little downstairs surprise going on there. But the point being that because at the time the majority of people perceived this as a beautiful victory, as a shift in humanity's path away from hatred and away from this perceived sort of racism we've struggled with, the way it read in the Earth's ionosphere was like a spike in joy and elevation. We're talking the human collective. Like, I know this was in America, but it was being watched around the world, and there was a global response. And in fact, it was precognitive, is another thing they found, is that the spike in sort of human joy and excitement happened right before the results were released. So there's like a precognitive element to the human collective's perception here. So comparatively, they did the same measurements for 9/11. And so, of course, right before the actual instance of, you know, the explosions at the towers in New York, there was this spike in sort of terror and stress in the human collective, right? So again, like, if you go back and look at that, the impact of that for, you know, Obama, was it really unhealthy for humanity to have a moment of shared joy? Is that meaningless because there's deception? Does it have no power? Does it have no momentum at all because there's deception? I don't think so. I think there is momentum to the human spirit, to human evolution, that goes way beyond creepy plans of like New World Order, globalists, and all this stuff. There's a momentum to human evolution that I really don't think they have the power to stop.
No, I don't think so. And
Not
I
at
think
all.
that's why, like, it's really helpful to keep doing the work in the physical realm and, like, you know, but realize that all the events that play out, and even in your individual life, you know, all the little traumas that you have in your life because you're human, you know, those things are just part of the whole entire experience. Like, it's not...
Yes. Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, because it's like both the elation and the sort of trauma of being deceived is part of it. Is part of the evolving way of humanity. That we can look back and be like, oh man, that was so elating, but also we were being deeply deceived. That, in fact, after Obama took office, racism became much worse.
Well, I guess it's both.
Got worse,
right?
right?
It has to be both.
Yes,
Again,
we have
this
to
is
hold
the,
space.
Like, not the black and white
Yes.
thinking. And also, on top of that, I think you really have to let go of what you think you know, for sure.
Yeah.
What you think you know for sure is true.
Reduce your knowings. Yes.
You don't want to get rid of all your knowings, because some of those things, they help you know what's safe and not.
Sure, but who doesn't have too many knowings?
Yeah, I think
No
generally
one. All people. All people have too many knowings. Maybe like some crazy like teachers who have elevated, like there's like 3 on Earth right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
But 99.9% of the human population has too many knowings.
Yeah.
And so it's something, you know, we need to take note of. So I think in the context of this, and really, like, I wanted to make this suddenly because I was like, man, I'm like, I can't even field all the messages I'm getting about this Prime Minister's speech and how worried people are that it's another great deception. Like, there's so much anxiety. And again, I'll say, like, I didn't share it to say invest in this person as a savior. No one should be doing that.
Well, maybe it's
Right?
just that it has been a grueling time.
It's a trauma response, which I recognize, right? It's a
Yeah.
trauma response where it's like, no, don't get hope up again. Like, careful with our hope. But it's like, you can have hope. You can have hope. You're allowed to have hope. And that doesn't mean you know that person or don't know that person.
Well,
It doesn't mean any of that, right? Like, there is, I think, something purposeful to sharing elation and hope together and not just calling it hopium and blackpilling everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And I guess, like, a healthy dose of uncertainty is always good. Like, what do you do with uncertainty? You know?
Yeah.
In any situation, even when you feel like you really, really know.
Yeah.
You know, how do you actually also at the same time really hold this sort of, like, uncertainty? And it's delicate.
I think that goes back
For
to the...
your psyche, it's delicate, you know?
What was his name again? This guy? Archbishop Vigano. He has a very measured view. I just read you guys a couple excerpts, but I really suggest... This is a Gateway Pundit article called Exclusive. Many people are becoming aware of the very serious coup d'etat that is being carried out by supranational powers, which is a quote from the Archbishop's statement. They have a PDF of his statement written out in English, but it's very measured because he presents the uncertainty beautifully. He says she is nothing but potential right now. We don't know anything. We know she has these globalist connections, but we also know that she was brought into office by the power of the people, by a massive majority, and that needs to be reconciled as well. So we need to be uncertain and also have hope, right? There is power to someone articulating what is going on, right? Let's say she is some sort of agent. Then they needed to show their cards right now. Worst case scenario, she's totally evil, it's a big manipulation. Then they're at a precipice of their own plan where they had to get one of their own people to lay out what the hell they're doing and just point to it without any of the veneers. Just say we're attacking identity. We don't want you to have an identity that has roots, that has family, that has religion. We don't want you to have any of that. We want to strip that from you, right?
Yeah, maybe
And
they're being bold.
There could be a boldness while there's this sort of predictive programming thing, or like this idea that they have to tell you what they're doing. A lot of people talk about this in terms of like cosmic laws of free will, that like if they tell us what they're doing, it sort of creates a situation where it's permission, where it creates like permission for them to enact these things on us, because it's like, well, we told you what we were doing. So there's some theories around that, right? But all of these things I just think should be considered, and hold it all lightly. And go, like, if you want to understand the uncertainty sort of context of all this, go watch all the news panic about this woman. And then do your own dig about her connections, and then go read the Archbishop's statement. And between all of those things, even the video that I showed of her supporting the passport, hold all of those things together. Because it's going to bring nothing but uncertainty. There's too many factors. We cannot know. But I would say this is potentially one of those events that's being felt around the world. So every time humanity goes into one of these experiences where there's like a global sense of humanity, that's good. No matter what triggers it. Yeah, that's good. When we feel together,
they have their counter, like, fascism fear, counteracting, potentially people feeling uplifted. And so there's these forces,
A lot of forces.
Curious to see what happens.
It will be very interesting to watch Italy over the next couple months and see how much she's able to actually enact according to the language that she's using and who she claims to be now. But again, as the Archbishop pointed out, they didn't say they were going to steer away from the European Union stuff and from like all these corrupt agendas. Mm-hmm. But they've been put into office by people who are going to demand that. So what will play out here? What, again, back to the initial question we asked at the beginning, what is the will of the people? What is that thing? How does it manifest? And can we really say that it doesn't exist? Can we give up on the will of the people because there's some corrupt, wackos trying to live out their sort of dark ancestral wet dream of ruling the earth?
Plus, I think also changing the systems that are crumbling before our eyes, it was going to take time, and it will be messy, and it won't be, there won't be some leader that's going to come in that's just going to save the day. Like, that's kind of fairy tale.
Yeah.
That doesn't
it's
seem
not about that.
Accurate. I mean, I guess it's possible. Again, I can't say it's possible some knight in shining armor leader comes in and saves the day, but
the reason I don't
it doesn't make sense that would occur at this point in time. But again, it's always possible. I can't say.
No, it's not possible because it's one heart at a time. It's one sovereign human being waking up at a time.
Yes.
No one can wake up people for the people.
No.
Each person has to awaken to their sovereign capacity to be free. And that's chaotic as hell. It's going to be chaotic. Even if there are heroes along the way, at no point will those heroes be able to skip the awkwardness of one heart at a time.
Yes.
No one can. No one can skip that ugly, nasty, struggling, sort of thick, complicated, messy thing that we have to just face. That it's like the karma of humanity is for us to wake up one at a time, and it's just going to be sloppy. And that's okay. I love it. I'm glad to be here. Yeah. Woo! It's a good time. It's a good ride.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, I think that's all we have to say for today, right? We're going to go put our children to bed. And I'm going to try and run this outro. And hopefully this live stream worked. And if it didn't, then it will just become a normal podcast, hopefully. And, yeah. So, thanks. Thanks for joining us, fellow humans. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.